Good evening, and welcome to another episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Perry.
And I'm your host, David. Tonight we're talking about Season 5, Episode 1, Apocalypse Rising. Before we continue, you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube as The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. Though, again, Twitter is now called X. Whatever. You can call it, you find us in all those places.
Absolutely. And as I say every single week, you should find us and follow us because this show is awesome. And as we go through each and every episode of each and every season, it gets even more awesome. And we just got through with season 4. I'm really excited about season 5. And season 5, the opener, doesn't disappoint. So I just want to jump right into it. I know we normally do like our normal check-in and stuff like that, but there's so much in this episode that I want to talk about. So we're gonna like try to skip that to the end, and then we'll give you that kind of update stuff and talk about what we're going to do in the coming days, weeks, and whatever else and all that stuff. But let's get into this. So, David, do you want to give the recap or do you want me to do it?
I'm thinking this is definitely a you should recap kind of episode.
All right. I love it when I hear that because, yes, I feel like this is just, like I said, there's a lot to unpack here. So I'm really going to keep this summation short. Again, if you want to, know the full ins and outs as well, you should want to know all the ins and outs. Go watch the episode. It's on Paramount Plus right now. You can watch all of the treks except for Prodigy on Paramount Plus right now. So go watch it and then come back and see if you agree with anything that we said or if there's something that we missed. We're going to try not to miss anything, but still. Anyway, this episode, again, season 5 opener, it pretty much picks up right where season 4 left off. If you remember in season 4, Odo had just been turned into a human and he was kind of at this crossroads as to what to do with himself. Okay. So in season 5, we see that the war between the Federation and the Klingons has really kind of reached a fever pitch. That kind of nonchalant, they're a long ways away from here statement that Cisco uttered in season 4 now seems to have kind of come back to bite them a little bit. The Klingons are massing everywhere. Federation is barely able to hold them off or slow them down. Something just has to be done with these warmongering Klingons. And so the Federation has decided, based upon the intel that Cisco and company provided at the end of season 4, that they want to put together a task force to go and expose Changeling Gowron. And the person they put in charge of this mission is none other than Captain Cisco himself. Because, of
hmm
course, why not? You brought us the intel. Don't walk us all the way up to the cliff and then don't have a solution. So here, he's the one who's going to have to figure it out.
Yep.
So tasked with figuring out how to expose the changeling. Again, it's important to note it's expose, not kill, not replace, expose.
hmm
How to expose Gowron, Starfleet gives him these experimental prototype Polaron burst devices, which they believe that a changeling, once exposed to Polaron radiation, will lose its ability to be a cohesive being, fall apart. Which, with the Klingons and how obsessive they are with blood screenings and so forth, this is probably the only way they're going to be able to expose Gowron. So Cisco has decided that he and a few elite officers are going to break into this highly defensible or highly defensive area of Klingon space known as Taiga Core, where Gowron's going to be, and apparently has fortified himself to expose him. But in order to do so, they're going to have to go undercover. So they use the apparently incredible yet never talked about skill of Dr. Bashir to alter them from looking like humans or, in Odo's case, human changeling, whatever he is,
hmm
to look like Klingons. They also lure Gul Dukat to the station under false pretenses to use his hijacked Klingon ship to transport Cisco, Odo, O'Brien, and Worf to Tyga Core to expose Gowron. Now, Gowron and a bunch of other elite Klingons are gathering in this area because there is something called the Order of the Batleth. It's a very honorable ceremony in which people who have distinguished themselves in battle are going to get special recognition from their chancellor, who is, of course, Gowron. Gowron's going to be there. Martok's going to be there. A bunch of other Klingons are going to be there. A bunch of Klingon ships. And it's, again, there's just a bunch of Klingons everywhere. And sending in these Federation officers seems like the height of folly, but whatever. While they're en route on Gul Dukat's stolen Klingon ship, they
Mhm.
practice being a Klingon. They're given lessons by Worf, of course, which, whatever you want to say about Worf, is it good to be taking lessons from a guy who's been labeled a traitor by the Klingons? I don't know. I mean, does he know more about Klingon culture than any of the rest of them? Yes. So we got
Yeah.
kind of a weird situation here on taking these orders, or taking his cues, I should say. They make it to Tycho Core. They have to go through this endurance ceremony, which is basically everybody carousing around, drinking, fighting, and whatever else for hours on end until Gowron finally shows up and begins the ceremony. As they're setting up their Polaron devices, uh, Martok Martok appears and he kind of questions O'Brien. He's like, "There's something about you very familiar, not really sure," something along those lines. O'Brien's able to deflect. Martok moves on, but then as they go to set up the devices, Cisco's name is called. So before he can actually activate the devices, Cisco's fake name is called. So he walks up to the podium. He stands in front of Gowron. He actually accepts his medal for the Order of the Batleth. And then as he begins to walk down the podium from the dais, Martok hits him in the back and exposes him as Captain Benjamin Sisko. They're
Right.
all rounded up, thrown in jail, and Martok comes in and questions them. He's like, "What did you possibly think was going to happen? You could just walk in here and do this and so forth." They kind of lay out the gist of their plan and their suspicions about Gowron, which then Martok kind of feeds into. He's like, "Yeah, now that you say it, some of the things that Gowron has been doing lately has just not made any sense. I mean, we've had a lot of losses, we've had a lot of just random whatevers, and he doesn't listen to anybody. So something is off with him," which again feeds into everybody's suspicion that Gowron is a changeling.
Right.
Martok agrees to actually help them out. He's going to spring them from jail and allow them to go and confront Gowron. Their Polaron devices have been destroyed, so the only way that they can really expose Gowron at this point is to kill him, because
Right.
again, a changeling once killed will revert to their gelatinous state.
Right.
So they do. They spring the trap. Martok murders a bunch of other Klingons around, just like
Yep.
because he seems to really enjoy it.
Yep.
Lets him loose. They go out into the gathering hall. Worf immediately attacks Gowron and starts doing this weird dagger versus Batleth fight. Gowron makes his guard stand down and he takes on Worf's challenge directly.
Like
Which
like a true Klingon warrior.
exactly, like a true Klingon would, which alerts Odo that something's off here because his people don't really care about honor and glory and whatever else. They should have just shot him as far as
Right.
they was concerned, or let his guards finish him off or anything like that. So now Odo, who has been um, basically detained by Martok doesn't
Mhm.
want him in there, basically accusing him of being a traitor, holds him back. And he starts kind of needling Martok a little bit until it's finally revealed that it's actually Martok who destroyed the Polaron devices. And Martok, well, is the changeling.
Right.
They tussle. He exposes Martok. Cisco starts shooting at Martok, which makes the other Klingons start shooting at Martok, which causes him to revert to his gelatinous state, and he dies. Now Odo is responsible for the death of two changelings.
Yep.
Um, Gowron and the rest of them kind of de-escalate the situation. They agree that at least they should be talking because that's what the Dominion was trying to destabilize in the first place. If the plan had succeeded, then Gowron would have been murdered, Martok would have been installed as Chancellor, and then that would have been Changeling Martok in control of the Klingon fleet and military and everything else, and they could have really gone on the warpath against the Federation. So now that they're back into tentative peace talks, this gives them a reason to kind of, de-escalate things. Our Starfleet officers go back to the station where they are reverted back to their human, or again, in Odo's case, whatever he is, self.
Yes.
And that's essentially the episode. All right.
Right.
Again, lots to unpack here. We are going to do it, but I was trying to give you as just the salient points in 10
Yes.
minutes or less. So there you
Yes.
go.
Boom.
All right. So with that being said, clearly I'm like really excited about this episode, but I always like to ask, since David has not seen any of this before, what did you think of this episode watching it?
This is a great episode. I mean,
Yes, it
this
is.
has just about everything you can ask for. I only have one small minor complaint, and that's just that Dax once again seems to get shortchanged, but I can talk about that later. I'll explain what I mean later. But it has everything. You got Klingons. You got our favorite characters dressing up as Klingons. You got the Klingon culture fighting, but you have a great plot. You have twisting, conspiracy theories back and forth. I was actually trying to poke holes in the theory of like how the story happened. Like I was thinking, oh wait, that doesn't make sense. And then I thought about it more, like, no, it actually does make sense. Like
Yeah, I
this
think I know what
actually,
you're going to be talking about there, but there are a couple of things like even in my, because I did rewatch this episode,
yeah,
I was like, that doesn't make any sense. With that, again, I had the same thought where of wait a second, it actually does make sense if you remember certain
exactly.
things. So we're going to
Yes.
talk about that.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. I'm
Yes.
glad that you picked up on that. But again,
You
I'm
got
glad
Gul
you.
Dukat showing back up for a quick cameo, basically reminding us that he has a Klingon warship. He's the way that they get to the Klingon world here. Um, yeah, I, I was when Gul Dukat is talking with Kira, and he's like, "What's your plan for infiltrating the Klingons?" And then they walk into the room where they have been, it's Cisco, Odo, and O'Brien who have been changed to look like Klingons. It looks immaculate, especially
They
Odo.
look they look great. I have to admit, they do
Yes,
look great. And Cisco makes a pretty terrifying Klingon.
yes, yeah. At
I
the
know they worked on all of them, but the big reveal of Cisco at the end as a Klingon, I think they did
yes,
that on purpose
oh
in
yeah,
that scene because he does like it works. It fits. I
yes.
think it was like surprising how well it worked for him.
Well, it's so funny because at the end of the episode, he's like, "Oh man, I missed the fangs." Oh, Odo's like, I'm not gonna miss the fangs," and Cisco's like, "I am." It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, you were rocking the fangs, bro.
Mhm. But there's a
uh,
lot about that you're gonna miss. Like you said, he said I could do without the forehead ridges, but the fangs. I'm like, yeah,
yes,
I feel like there's more to it. Because if anything, he even seemed like Cisco was already a tall person, but I swear he seemed taller
yeah.
when he was wearing all
Yeah,
the
like,
getup and
the
stuff.
ridges, and then his hair
Yeah,
popped up like an extra inch. Yeah, they look great. Again, the plot is great. You got your twists and turns. Your oh, we think that Gowron's the changeling. Oh, it actually turns out it's not Gowron. I actually suspected that. Again, I'm such a jaded watcher of storytelling that I figured maybe one of the twists would be it's actually not Gowron, and I actually like that because I like Gowron as a character, and I would hate
mm,
for Gowron the character to be subverted by turning out to just be a changeling. I like the fact
no,
that yeah, no, he's been in control the whole time. This is exactly what he is. This is him and his Klingon Empire turning against the Federation because they are unleashing their Klingonness, and it was not him that was acting out of character. It was his general that was doing so.
yeah,
Um, I don't know if we want to get into all the details of the story just yet, other than to say that I really liked the episode. Great follow up to last one. Great follow up to the beginning of last season because this is what we haven't seen Gowron basically since. Well, I guess we had the cameo of him on the screen from the last episode, him saying we're gonna go conquer the Archeron territory or whatever that territory is called.
Arcanus.
Arcanus, there we go. But he hasn't shown up in person until this episode. And his last scene, when he's talking with Cisco, he says to Worf, you know, next time you see me, I'm
Yeah,
not
he's like,
going
you should
to
have
kill
killed me
me.
when you had the
That's
chance.
what
I'll
it
make
was.
sure you don't get another.
Yeah,
It's
it's
like
a
I love the
great line.
veiled threat. It's like you can't
Yes.
let a moment go, can you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Galron was an absolute menace this entire episode, but it was
Yes.
spot on. It was perfect.
Yes.
I loved it. He
Yeah.
absolutely was a menace the whole
Yes.
time.
And I love the fact that, like, for example, Odo starts to realize the problems when Gowron commits to the fight, the one-on-one fight. That's a Klingon thing. Hey, wait a minute. Why isn't he just shooting everybody? That's what I would expect him to do if he was a changeling trying to protect himself. Oh, it's perfect. The storyline really, if you know the Klingons as a group, if you know the changelings as a group, this story makes sense. And that's why it's so great. Because again, I was trying to poke holes in the theory. Like, for example, if Martok is the changeling, then like how does like basically I was thinking like, wait a minute, did he know about the plan beforehand? No, he didn't. Why did he stop them if he was trying to get them to um kill Gowron? Well, no, they weren't trying to kill Gowron, they're trying to expose him. So he had to stop the exposure because it actually would have exposed him.
Hmm.
It all makes sense once you think about it. This plot is actually airtight as far as I can think.
Yeah.
Which is great. I love poking at stories to find out what I would do differently, how would I change things, and then to find a story that's like, no, I can't think of any issues with it. This is exactly right. That's amazing. I love that.
So now, before we get into some of those areas where you would have initially been like, "Up, that's wrong," but ultimately why it proves to be right, I do
Uh-huh.
want to say a couple things. First, I love that this is how they started season 5. I mean, they jump right in. There's
Feet
no
first.
lead up. There's no kind of slow meandering getting us to what could potentially be the story of the season,
Right.
or the gradual changes in the characters and so forth. That's what we associate a lot with Trek, mainly because of the way that it was heavily episodic, especially with like Next Generation, and
Right.
Voyager kind of returns to that. Voyager is weird in the sense that it kind of flips back and forth between whether or not they're trying to do an episodic show or a serialized show.
Hmm.
So it's there's moments where they make references to things that happened in earlier seasons, but then they like totally forget about it later on. So
Right.
so I like that they stuck with it here, because it's one of those things that like so many people complain about, especially with like newer Trek, how everything has gone into serialization. They miss the never ending stream of bottle episodes, basically no two episodes really needing to relate to each other and so forth. And a lot of new Trek is that way. It's a lot of serialization, like Discovery was that way. Strange New Worlds is again kind of doing this. We're trying to straddle a line, where they'll do a series of unrelated episodes, but then they'll pick one, and then there'll be
Right.
something about that one that relates to a story later on. So they kind of are trying to have their cake and eat it too there. It's weird that they're doing so well with that. I will give them credit for that. It's weird they're doing so well with it, but again, that's been the major complaint with newer Trek, is that some people seem to want it to go back to the episodic nature of it, but truly, like, the better characters are the ones that are planned out and that we see the growth and development of, and that really can only come through serialization. And that's why, to me, Deep Space Nine is such a great show. We really get to track the growth of these characters. Cisco, the opener of Cisco here in season 5, is vastly different from the Cisco that we saw in season 1, and you can't deny that. I mean, beyond the look, the aesthetic,
Hmm.
the way he encounters people and talks to people, I thought about it because something that we said early on in season 1, even in doing our show, was how Cisco was like kind of an observer. He stood back, he, let people do things around him, and then he would softly interject. There was always that kind of veiled threat a bit, to
Right.
what he was doing. Here, there's none of that. He is the man. He is in control. He is very direct. He doesn't have time for any kind of nonsense. And we see that he even here, when he comes into the bar looking for Odo, Quark is trying to talk and do whatever, and he's just very dismissive. Don't have time. Where is he? So forth and so on. So I definitely like that. And then again, before we switch to the other stuff, I just have to talk about them altering themselves to look like Klingons. We've seen this in Trek before, and I have to admit, it's always disturbed me. The
Yeah, it
level that they
does.
can
Yeah.
just make you look like a whole other species.
Yeah. Turns out changelings aren't very unique. The Federation has that technology already.
Right. Like, I mean that's supposed to be the thing about Oda. I mean, it's the way that he can do it, of course, and
Right.
it's instant, versus we're led to assume here with Bashir doing this. This is several hours of refining a technique and so forth. And he's not just doing a prosthesis.
Uh-huh.
This is genetic manipulation to make them look like Klingons.
Right.
That's what this is. He's stimulating hair growth. He's changing the cranial shape. He's making their teeth grow. He's doing all of these very seemingly permanent things to
Yes.
them. Horrifying.
Yeah.
Absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, the best analogy I can think of is like the whole turning into a werewolf at midnight because of the moon type
Yeah.
thing. Like, how do
Yes.
you ungrow hair or ungrow claws? How do you ungrow a giant muzzle and fangs? Um, yeah, I totally understand that. It's bizarre, but man, it really worked this time.
Oh yeah. I mean, but and like I said, it's one of those things that shows up in Trek, and I don't know why we give it such a collective pass, but if you think about it, what they're doing is physical and genetic manipulation.
Yep.
Humans don't naturally have fangs and cranial ridges, and you can't just alter the bone structure and make it work. You need extra bone for that. There's a certain density for that. And then you
Right.
have to make sure that it's going to work for the person. You can't just alter these things and then be like, okay, you're done and
Right.
walk out. They could have all kinds of internal issues. So there's
Right.
a delicate genetic balancing act that we don't really see here, and that interesting enough, they touch on in Strange New Worlds in a couple of episodes with genetic modification.
Right.
But yeah, I mean that's what they're doing. They're physiologically changing this person to meet a certain criteria. And I mean, what if Bashir dies before they
Right.
can get back to their original bodies, or
Right.
the next surgeon that comes along isn't as good and can't reverse the process. They got to
Right.
walk around with fangs and long hair for forever now because they did this for a mission. Like it's a lot.
And
the,
they
the
insinuate, yeah,
implications behind it are heady, man.
yeah, they insinuate that very thing. You're right. Like if Dr. Bashir can't get them back, what are they gonna do? Um, so while we're talking this, I want to mention the thing that I thought was going to be a plot hole until they addressed it. Literally, is the last scene of the episode. Last
Okay.
episode, in our previous episode, Odo came back from being from the Changeling's Great Link, and they made him a solid, but they left him with his face because they wanted him to have a reminder of who he actually is and what he's lost. And so at the very start of season 5, we have facial reconstruction surgery being brought back as a plot point, and I was like, oh, turns out Odo's punishment isn't going to be that big of a problem. They can just give him a normal human face, easy as pie. And so at the end of the episode, when they go to take off the Klingon changes, they say, "Do you want?" Bashir basically says, "I can do anything I want to give you whatever face you want." He says, "No, give me my normal face." So I'm glad they addressed that because
Hmm.
the whole episode, it was in the back of my head. I was like, how are they going to fix that? And then, are they just going to skip past it? But they didn't. They addressed it. Odo chooses to keep it. I'm glad they didn't try and pretend like it wasn't an issue. They gave us a character-based reason for why he still looks like the way he does. So yeah, that was great.
Oh yeah, I have to admit, like I thought the same thing because I mean we just watched in season 4 the end and them talking about the importance of why he has his face and so forth, and then for them to drastically alter it right away, and it was like no fuss no muss, and then even Bashir's like, yeah, I can give you any face you want. I mean, there's a huge asterisk beside that, provided you're willing to sit through the hours it's going to take to genetically modify you to look like whatever the hell it is that we're going to turn you into, you
Right.
know. But yeah, he's just like, yeah, we can do that whenever, like almost like, I'm free next Saturday. Come by, we'll turn you into a trill.
Yeah.
Just see how it works,
Who likes leopard print down their sides? I do.
Hey, you know what? Dax in that leopard print has inspired many a fantasy, so we're just gonna, leave it there.
Exactly. Exactly.
So, okay, so those two, I mean, I wanted to make sure we definitely talked about that. Now, let's talk some of those points that I'm sure were on your mind as to what you thought was going to be a plot hole, but then turned out to be all right. What's
Yeah.
your first one? What do you got?
Well, for me, I'm just going to summarize it as all of the like the original plot is they're going to put these 4 round devices, these spheres, are in different parts of the room. Turn it on. It's going to show that Gowron's a changeling, and boom. And then it turns out that Marduk attacks Cisco, and then he says that it's Gowron that destroyed the devices, but we actually learn no, it was him that destroyed the devices. Basically,
Mhm.
what I'm getting at is if I was thinking, well, if they were trying to undermine Gowron, if they were trying to do something with Gowron, then why does
Martok.
Martok get involved? Why doesn't he just like basically escape or get away or get involved? But no, it turns out the reason he does is because he would be revealed to be the changeling. He needs to get rid of the devices as soon as possible. I thought, well, maybe like how does he know what to look for? How what to be afraid of? Well, he's a changeling. They keep in contact with each other well enough that they could have warned him about the plot. Anyway, what I'm getting at is that all of the stuff around Gowron and Martok, I was trying to make sure I was following all the plot points, and there were moments where I thought, wait, that doesn't make sense. But then I thought about it more. I was like, no, that does make sense. For example, Martok is just killing Klingons, as you pointed out, as they're escaping. And it's
Oh
like,
man, he's
yeah,
just killing them left and like no care, concern whatsoever. He turns and fires his disruptor at a couple. He walks down the hall and dual wields and stabs two.
that
And
was
I mean,
pretty
I was just
awesome.
like, dude, I was like, you
Yeah,
just like they have a family. That was my first
yeah,
thought when I was like, that he might have a son or a
yeah.
daughter he's trying to raise
Well,
over there.
and 2 seconds ago, he was just complaining that Gowron's apparently wasting all of their, men. They're losing people left and right, and then here you are just willy nilly stabbing people. Doesn't seem absolutely necessary. I mean, turn the phaser to stun. I mean, I don't know if Klingons even do stun, but you get the point.
Yeah,
Um,
I get the distinct impression there's not a stun setting on the Klingon disruptor. Don't
right,
seem like something
exactly,
they would really bother with,
right.
you know.
But I just liked that the plot made sense. Yes, it turns out that Mark he probably realized who O'Brien was when he went up to O'Brien. Like
All right.
he wasn't. Oh, who's that? No, he knew exactly who he was. He waited till Cisco was called up, and maybe even figured out who Cisco was in the list of names. Like he already knew who was supposed to be on there and whose name doesn't match, and so that way he can reveal Cisco is actually the one.
So I
Um,
have a theory about that he didn't know who Cisco or O'Brien were, but he was familiar with them because it also relates to something else that I thought was interesting in
right,
this because and I'm sure a lot of people were screaming it the whole time anyway was if you notice when we go back to the whole altering their appearance, who doesn't get any alterations? Who
Worf.
really should have?
Yeah,
Worf.
Worf should have had a
Worf
lot. Yeah,
absolutely. He is very familiar with Gowron. He's known Gowron for years.
right,
If anybody is going to be in a room with Gowron and needs their identity hidden, it's Worf.
right,
He's had the most to deal with that man. He should have been altered, but he wasn't.
right,
Then, when you think about everything else that happens, who are the two people that are confronted by Martok? O'Brien and Cisco. Why would it be O'Brien and Cisco? Well, for one, we know that Cisco was heading up the task force with Admiral Layton back when the Changelings tried to infiltrate Earth. We
right,
know that Admiral Layton was a Changeling who also encountered Cisco and Odo.
right.
We also know that during that episode, who was the officer that was impersonated by the Changeling? O'Brien.
O'Brien.
So these
Ah,
two are the two that it seems like the changelings, for whatever reason, they're the most familiar with.
right,
So when it comes to, now here we are all these months later and we're doing this mission, it would make sense that the two that they recognize are Cisco and O'Brien.
right,
They've never really encountered Worf. We haven't had any dealings with changelings directly and Worf as
right,
of yet.
right.
So they may be familiar with who's on the station, right? They might know who the
Yeah,
officers are, but to know them to the degree and detail
I
that they
know
know
that face.
O'Brien,
I
right?
know that
And
face.
that's what he kept
Yeah,
saying. And it's like, why would that face seem so familiar to you? Because there was the changeling who got away. We never saw that changeling on Earth ever again.
right,
There was a changeling who got away, who we know impersonated O'Brien, who we
right,
know had dealings with Cisco. They talked,
right,
So that's why those two stood out.
right.
So
And
yeah, to me,
avoiding Odo by that mark, he doesn't want to interact with Odo as much as he can probably because he's
right.
probably the most likely to recognize an issue as we found out. And yeah,
And who are Worf and who is Worf with that we see during the ceremony, the the endurance ceremony before the Order of the Battle stuff starts, he's with Odo. When Odo drops his Polaron emitter,
That's
Worf
right.
is the one who comes to Odo's defense, which means he was probably keeping a closer eye on Odo than he was anybody else.
Right.
So if Martok is watching the group as well, he probably did recognize Odo,
Right.
but he didn't recognize the other Klingon that was around him. So it's probably a good idea to steer clear of that group for now while he
Right.
was focused on his other two that he just couldn't quite place until he did. So
Right.
that to me was like why this works, because the whole time I'm like, how does he not recognize Worf? And then it's like, oh, he didn't recognize Worf because that's not really Martok.
Right.
Martok and Worf did meet,
Right.
but that's not really Martok. So that's why he didn't
Right.
jump out at Worf. And it also explains why Worf doesn't need the makeup. The
Right.
person who confronts them is the only person who should have recognized him but didn't. Gowron never steps up. The only person that Gowron actually gets to see up close is Cisco, who's
Right.
immediately knocked down by Martok. So
Right.
it worked. Again,
Right.
I kept screaming, "Oh, that's a plot hole. He should recognize Worf. Worf should have been on alert." And if anything, that's the failing is that when they're all in jail and Gowron or Martok is outside of the cell and he's yelling at Cisco and so forth, the fact that he never really talks to Worf and gets into any of it with Worf is a little bit of a tell. But as we saw in
Right.
that same scene, Odo was already kind of suspicious. So
Right.
that kind of took care of itself there.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. The scene where he walks in for the first time, Martok, and he sees the four of them, and he looks at them closely, and they go kapla, kapla, kapla. That makes sense. Like he's recognizing, these are this is Cisco, this is O'Brien, this is
Hmm.
the group that's come to reveal me. I need to watch what they're doing. When Cisco comes up on stage, he already has a reason to suspect him, and in that moment takes the chance to try and
Hmm.
undo whatever might be happening, destroys the devices, etc. Um,
Yeah, and it's
and
clear
I
he knew
guess
that they were probably there to expose the changeling, but without knowing
yes,
how they were going to expose him, that also explains why Martok
right,
decided to confront them because he didn't
right,
know what they were going to be doing, and it could have endangered him. It could have exposed him inadvertently. So yeah,
right,
by making them basically rework their plan and making them a part of his own plan, he
right,
minimizes his risk. He just didn't count on Odo noticing the language that he was using and picking up on
right.
those cues that they would only share because they're a part of the same culture.
Right. And that's also why he doesn't immediately, like when he sees the four of them, they do the Qapla' greeting, he doesn't immediately arrest them because he's like, I don't know what their plan is. I need to
Hmm.
wait long enough for them to expose themselves. Or, Cisco is isolated up on stage. He's in front of everyone. He can attack him and say something about him publicly without making a big scene. Otherwise, he's making a scene, but everyone's already focused on the moment. That's what I'm getting at. Yeah, it's great. Like the whole idea the whole time is we gotta get Gowron, we gotta get Gowron, we gotta get Gowron, and everything great about a good twist is you were all of the things were planted throughout the episode, and then the plot is revealed. The conspiracy is revealed, the twist is revealed, and it turns out they had been leading the breadcrumbs all along. And so this is exactly why it's a great episode, because they did do that. As we go back to the episode and talk about it, especially now, yeah, everything was planted perfectly for this episode to make sense about why things happened the way they did. Um, yeah, the fact that it's not Galron, again, I already said it. I'm liking that's the
Hmm.
fact. Galron's a great character. They would have been subverting his character if they had just turned him to a changeling. But remind me, how do we really? I know we've met Martok before,
Yes,
but for the
we
moment, I can't really remember what else we've seen him.
we
What's our relationship with him? Yeah.
so so the character of Martok we actually get to see for the very first time in the same episode that we got to see War for the first time, which is all the way back at the beginning of season 4, Way of the Warrior.
Right.
What happens in that
Right.
episode is the Klingons have shown up in force. There's a bunch of them, their ships around the station and so forth. And Martok is in charge of that contingent that has shown up at Deep Space Nine. Now,
Right.
we don't directly get any involvement with him until after Worf beats up his son, Drex. Drex is acting the fool in the bar. He ends up attacking Garrick. Worf comes onto the
Right.
station. He flips him a couple of times and steals his Daktok, his dagger, and then Gowron, or not
Right.
Gowron, but Martok comes to Worf's quarters to deliver the best character opening line I've ever heard in my life. He walks into Worf's quarters and he says, "I've come for my son Stock. Give it to me, or I'll take it from you." And I was just like, I love it.
That's right. I
I
remember that line.
absolutely love
Yeah.
it. So
And then Worf is a great rejoinder to that. What does he say to
he
that?
says, "Now that you're here, I no longer need it," and he gives it to him. And then they start talking, and that's their first introduction to each other.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Ah,
great
it's
scene.
a bummer his character's gone now because he was a great character.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a great scene. I love the character of Martok and the actor who plays Martok, J.G. Hertzler. I've actually had the privilege of meeting and speaking with him on a couple of different occasions. Great guy, a lot of fun.
Nice.
If you ever do get the chance, I don't know if he's still doing conventions and stuff now. And even if he was still doing them with the SAG after strike that's going on, they're not really participating in them anyway. But if that ever changes and you do get the opportunity to talk with him and meet with him and everything else, do it. Guy's a lot of fun. But that
Okay.
actor has also been in Trek before, and he actually played the Vulcan captain of the Saratoga in the pilot episode of Deep Space Nine. He is the captain of the Saratoga that where Cisco is the first officer that he serves under, and that captain dies. That Vulcan captain dies. So we don't see
Ah,
him. I
interesting.
don't think he ever gets a name, but he's the Vulcan captain in that one. And he,
I'm looking at it right now, and they say his name is. Oh no, they don't have a name for him. He's just Vulcan
yeah,
Captain. But his name, he was got his full name, not JG, but John Noah
yeah.
Hertzler. But anyway, keep going.
But he also pops up in a couple of other Trek things. He's an episode of Enterprise. He plays a Klingon judge or Klingon lawyer in that episode. He also pops up in an episode of Voyager as a Hirogen martial arts trainer who trained Seven of Nine to fight the Rock. It's a weird episode of Trek to say the least. The Rock is on it. He's another alien who beats up on Seven of Nine for a little bit, but yeah,
Okay.
entertaining. But yeah, it's there. So he's got a nice background with Trek as well. But I think that you can if you were to ask him, I think he'd be very upfront with that. Martok is probably his favorite character that he plays.
Yeah, that scar across his
Yeah,
face is classic
yeah.
Klingon.
He
He looks
even he
amazing.
even returned to voice the character in a Lower Decks episode as well as Martok. So yeah,
Really?
so
I'm curious how he could come back on a show that's, I guess, supposed to be in the
it's
future.
not actually.
But
Lower Decks is set after the end of Deep Space Nine, actually. So
well, I mean,
at the
at
end of
least in this
at the end of
episode.
Voyager slash Deep Space Nine and whatever.
Well, my point though is that if the character, as far as we know, is dead, but the changeling killing him took his
We
place.
don't know
But
that he's dead. We just know that a
okay, all right,
changeling took his
took his
place.
place. Okay, all right.
Mhm.
It's not been 100% like every changeling kills their person they're
Yes, it has
impersonating.
not been established yet that they kill them. They just impersonate
Right.
them.
Well, no, we know they don't because we know that, for example, back on Earth, Admiral, what's his
Admiral
face?
Layton was
There we
impersonating, and he
go.
was
So
still
he was
there.
in person. Exactly. But we know the ambassador, I think at the end of season 3 is supposed to have been killed, or at the very least he's gone missing.
Yes, the one who wanted them to
Um,
go to the Zenkethi border. As far as we know, that ambassador is dead.
right. Yeah. So they'll choose whatever they need to do to get things done. It sounds
Yeah,
like
that's
is
what
what I'm
I'm kind of
taking.
picking up on. It seems like it's more about like a convenience, ease of access type scenario. Whichever one works out the best, they go for.
Exactly.
Um,
Exactly.
but yeah, yeah, we don't know. We don't know that he's dead. So I'm not gonna go any further with that. I guess that's a mild
Well,
mild
I mean,
spoiler. Yeah, I told you a little too
yeah.
much. So,
Oh boy.
before we leave everything on the Klingon front and shift back to our Starfleet officers on the station, because there are some things to talk about with them, I want to say, did you notice when they were doing the Order of the Bat'leth? There are a couple of things. Um, did you notice where they were? Did anything about where they were stand out to you?
No,
David is shaking
not
his head
necessarily.
no, so I'm going to have to fill him in, of course. They are
Okay.
in the Hall of Heroes, which we had heard mentioned a few times by the infamous Kang, Kor, and Koloth when they were telling
Oh,
us all about, the hunt for the albino and where they will be when they die after they've completed this mission. They would be in the
right.
Hall of Heroes. And if you notice, little Easter egg for you, in the background of the Hall of Heroes, there are these giant statues of
Statues.
Klingons,
Yes.
and the two that they show are Kor and Koloth. So there are giant statues of
The two that
them.
died.
Yes, those the
Huh.
two that died. There are two statues of them, and they're in the episode. So if you're
Oh man, I need to go back and look more
yeah,
closely
you want to
now.
go back and take a closer look at those scenes. It's very brief, but they're there
Right.
and they're right next to
Right.
each other. So it's like it takes you a second to realize that's what they're showing you, but then because like the first part, you see like somebody's like hanging on one of this, like you see them like on the
Mm,
arm or something like that, and then when they pan
right.
out and do a wide shot, it's these two giant statues, and there's Kang and there's Koloth, and they're right there. So
Right.
there you go, little Easter egg for you to look
Got it.
for. Um,
Got it.
but the Order of the Batleth, what an interesting uh order ceremony. I mean, do you think that we have anything that's of an equivalent? I mean, so it's obviously it's associated with the military. You already have to be in the Klingon military to
Right.
get this distinction. You have to have proven yourself in battle countless times to receive this honor. So would this be, we say this is like their equivalent of like the Medal of Honor, perhaps?
I was going to suggest that as you were talking about it, but this Medal of Honor is supposed to be like you've been wounded. No, I'm sorry, that's the Purple Heart. Yeah, maybe the Medal of Honor. I mean, the Klingons definitely give it a more you're a battle ready, battle hardened,
Yeah,
you're ready to
you
go.
have to have like gone through some extreme stuff to be on the list. You can't just
Right.
be, 'cause I mean it's almost an assumption that all Klingons do military service at some point. So you can't just
Right.
be a regular soldier. You have to be
Right.
like you said, battle hardened, battle tested. You've come through some
Right.
terrible things, and not just come through them, but you were like the hero. You were the
Right.
star. You got special recognition
Right.
behind it.
Well,
So yeah.
yeah, yeah. The Klingons are more about did you take a risk to accomplish a military objective? Where I feel like the Medal of Honor is more of a did you risk your life to protect like a fellow soldier or a civilian? I mean, to get an objective accomplished for sure, but like really like put your own you made yourself vulnerable in a way that was very
Mhm.
self-sacrificing. Where I mean, Klingons don't, in my opinion, don't really seem to have the more self-sacrificing nature of battle. It's literally kind of you throw yourself out there in order to obtain objectives, but that's more for personal glory than to save the guy next to you. But yeah, that's I guess the most equivalent we would have. Again, it's a great example though, as just describing it, of why Klingons are a great culture for Star Trek to give us and have them compare to our own culture because it's like, oh yeah, they're totally doing it a different way, but
Yeah.
this is a similar ceremony. Yeah, they get
Yeah.
a something to wear on their chest,
A
and
nice, and it looked like a pretty prominent sized,
yeah,
pendant. Gowron's gotta push it on you and he's using both hands, and Klingons don't do anything light. So
yeah,
I'm imagining this thing is probably pretty heavy, nice solid piece of,
right. Gotta push it into
metal.
that leather.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It goes on nicely too.
Yeah.
Um, but
And then of
yeah,
course
yeah,
you got the ceremony itself, which like as Worf says, it's a endurance ceremony. It's about staying awake and drinking, and they're drinking copious amounts of blood wine, which
yes,
for all the stories that we've heard about blood wine, I have to admit this is probably the weakest representation of blood wine I've ever seen. It was, I mean, it was water with a few drops of food coloring in it.
yep,
Those scenes where we see them scooping it out and it comes out this kind of pale pink liquid. I mean, I swear,
yeah,
I feel like it was more red from the lighting than it was from the actual
yeah,
contents in the
yeah,
barrels.
yeah,
And they're drinking out of those old school, like silvery, pewtery looking
yep,
measuring cups.
yep,
My grandfather had one of those in his restaurant. I remember looking at it when I was a kid. So it's just like, that's what y'all are drinking out of. That's what
yeah.
Klingons are taking down this wine in.
Yeah, the blood part of the blood wine was definitely a bit missing in this episode for
Yeah.
sure. But the
And they're trying to,
comments that Odo
yeah,
and O'Brien have is hilarious, especially
apparently it
because
tastes awful.
yeah,
But it will make you so drunk that after a few cups, you'd
yeah,
be out as a
yeah,
human.
yeah. Worf is like, if you guys hadn't taken those uh, inebriation,
Anti-intoxicants, yeah.
y'all would be on the floor right now. But the blood wine scene ties into Odo's storyline in this episode because we first meet him in Quarks enjoying a beer Uh,
Yes, yeah, I forgot
he's
about that.
yes,
He's
the
intoxicated not just by the
bubbles.
beer itself, but by the sound of the bubbles hitting the
Yeah.
glass.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he says, like, I never understood eating or drinking before, but now that I'm a solid, it's a great consolation. What does he say? Delight. Um,
it's one of the few things that we solids, humanoids, have any kind of control over.
right.
And Cisco has a great line. He's like, "There's always the temptation to eat too much, to
Yes.
drink too much." So
Yes.
you know, great little bit there. I do want to say again that blood wine was a terrible representation. And if you are interested at all, there's a site you
Mm,
can go to that actually sells the human version of Klingon blood wine. It's called Star Trek Spirits. Just go to StarTrekSpirits.com. You can order it. I have not ordered that one as of yet, so I don't know if the consistency or whatever works. Um, as far as I understand it from the other representations that we've ever seen of Klingon blood wine, it's supposed to be a rather strong tasting, very dark, blood-like colored, and slightly thick, kind of syrupy consistency to make you think you're drinking like a thinned out blood, right? That's what it's supposed to be. So I don't know how close they get to that on the Star Trek Spirits one. I do understand that it is a rather dark colored wine that they use
right.
for it. So whether or not they're mixing that up and doing it justice, that's on you. I did get the Canar from this site,
Right.
and while the Canar had an interesting taste, I will also agree that it didn't live up to expectation when it comes to its consistency either. The
Okay.
representations that we've seen of Canar on D Space Nine so far, again, makes you think it's a rather it's a very thick liquid, and
Right.
that's not what I got.
Mm.
It had a good taste, don't get me wrong, but it was not that. But that leads me to the, of course, something that I've featured on this show a couple of times now, the what they call the official Star Trek cookbook, which I did purchase a while back, and
Mhm.
it does, of course, have its own Klingon blood wine recipe in here. And I've looked through the ingredients. I've not made it yet, but I've looked through these ingredients, and I feel like this will get you there. It probably won't be as thick unless you like change certain aspects of it. Like one of the ingredients calls for beet juice. So, like if you make your own beet juice at home, I'm sure there's a way you can add like a little bit of a thickening agent to that, so it doesn't change the flavor, just change the consistency. Then follow the rest of the recipe, and you're going to get something that would be a bit more akin to what they're going for. But I will tell you, the other ingredients here are not for the faint of heart. You've got cinnamon whiskey, spiced rum, you've got prune juice, there's some wine, there's pomegranate juice, there's all these things in here, and then there's a
Wow.
certain way you got to make it. So it's gonna come out pretty heady. I'm actually looking forward to doing this. I think I might do this for Christmas. So um, we'll see how my family takes to drinking Klingon blood wine for Christmas. But if you're interested,
Uh,
you can check that out in this book, and there's many other recipes online you can find. But this
right.
is the only one that I was like, as since it's supposed to be the official cookbook of Trek, this is what I'm gonna at least try.
Right.
So
Yeah.
all right, now that we've got that out of the way, let's turn our attention to those few crew members left on the station who didn't get to come with us.
Yes.
Um, I know that you had mentioned her earlier, so I'm gonna let you start. Dax.
Uh, I just feel so sorry for Dax. I feel, and this is season 5, and I feel like they long ago relegated poor Dax to side character who's there to look pretty and sometimes say something to Cisco. I mean, there's sometimes she gets an episode and she's interesting, but I mean, literally, she starts off with Cisco coming back from the trip to see the Federation,
Hmm.
but that doesn't really affect anything. And then we're like the next scene, Cisco's calling everyone together so they can work their plan together. And when they talk about these
The
spheres,
Polaron emitters.
yeah, that they're going to use, Dax stands up and goes over to the screen to talk about them, and it's not her that gives the line that explains what they do. It's Cisco. his own science officer isn't given the chance to actually explain the science tech. He does it. And I was at that point, I was just like, man, this is season 5, episode 1, and already
Yeah,
Dax can't even have her own lines. Like, what the heck is going on?
I have to admit, I love the character of Dax. I always have. But
Sure.
in
Yeah.
going back and rewatching this show with you, I there are so many times where now I have to realize that where did my love come from for that character? Because she does so little. And I mean, when she has her moments though, she's great. I think
Yeah.
that Terry Farrell does a great job with what she's
Yes.
given. That albino episode was a great episode, but it was it great for Dax or was it great for Kane, Core, and Koloff? Because I mean,
Yeah.
an
Hmm.
argument could be made that it was great for them and less
Yeah.
for her,
Right.
And then of course we had the rejoined episode, which is very much a Dax heavy episode. But I mean, that's kind of the first time that we've really gotten to see her do anything in a while,
Right.
you know. Yeah, Dax does take a bit of a back seat on a lot of things, and even this episode with her going with Cisco to Starfleet, coming back, and them hatching their plan and everything else. Why didn't she go with him? Why didn't she get altered? Why did it have to be Odo and O'Brien?
Exactly.
Why couldn't O'Brien say O'Brien didn't do anything in this episode that Dax couldn't have done?
No,
There's,
we
I
already
mean, literally,
know.
there's nothing.
I hadn't yet made the connection yet, but you're right because she, along with Worf, is the only one that already understands Klingon culture. She would have
Right?
fit in
She would
like
have
that
fit in
scene.
perfectly,
Yes, that scene.
and you came,
Odo and
yeah,
Ryan are like, "Oh man, I don't know if I could do this to be a Klingon." She would have been on top of it. I mean, it was great comedy to have Brian and Odo learn to be a Klingon, but yeah, it should have been Dax.
Dax should have been the one to go, and you can't even say that. Oh well, the Order of the Batleth is for men only because it's not. We see women
Yaisong,
honored in the
female.
Order of the
Yeah,
Batleth. So there
yeah,
were women who were in there who distinguished themselves. There's no reason that Dax could not have gone.
right,
It makes no sense, and actually, it would have made their mission work better because not only does she have an understanding of Klingon culture, but she's also another person that Martok hasn't had direct experience with, and that the Changeling Martok also hadn't had direct experience with. He had
right,
experience with O'Brien and Cisco, as we've already proven. He did
right,
not have that with Jadzia, and
right,
her being altered and in there would have added, just would have given them more options. I feel as a way to
right,
deploy these devices, and really their only weak link would have been Odo, and
right,
maybe that's like I guess from a out of universe standpoint as the writers putting this together, maybe that's why they did it because they didn't want the whole focus to be on Odo being so mopey he's causing a problem. Having someone like O'Brien who is just, totally checked out basically and is too human to make it, it
right,
gives us that comedic relief as a way to balance it. But
right.
no, in universe, Dax makes the most sense. She should have
It,
gone on this mission.
yeah, yeah. It's 100% true that she should have done it. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why they keep seeming to put her character like they like in season 5. Like, there's no excuse anymore to say we don't know what to do with her character. You've had 4 seasons to try. I mean, not that they haven't tried or given her good stuff, as we've just talked about, but man, I just as soon as her character stood up to explain what those devices were, and then Cisco delivered the line, I was just so surprised because Cisco doesn't say anything in the way he delivers that line that couldn't have been delivered by the science officer Dax.
And I thought that's also what we were going to get because, when he sets the devices down on the conference table, she's the first one to pick it up and she looks at it. And I'm like, okay, Dax, are you going to explain what it is? And then she just passes it to Bashir, who
Right,
asked the question, what is it? And
right,
then, yeah, in comes Cisco. And then she gets up and she gives the basic breakdown or whatever. But yeah, she could have led that whole bit, explain what the device was, how it works, why it's dangerous, why you can only do it one time. That all could have been her.
right. And
There
then
was
and then as backup, not only is she a good Klingon already, but then as backup, she could have been the one to like fix like if the devices had not worked. Oh well, don't worry, we have Dax there as backup to fix anything or rig a plan B.
right
Well, O'Brien
when
can rig a
Martok
plan B,
says,
but Yeah.
Yeah, but when Martok says that the devices had been destroyed, it would have been a great thing for Dax if she had been there to be like, okay, it's that sucks, it's destroyed, but maybe we can rig up some kind of primitive version or a
Right.
makeshift version or whatever. She just needs to have them stall for time, which is why Worf has to challenge Gowron, which still allows Odo to make the big reveal later on, but at
Right.
least would have given us more Dax on the scene. And personally, I
Right.
would love to see what Dax as a Klingon look like.
Yeah.
Just saying, you know. I guess they figure like once again, I think we're kind of trapped in one of those. This was the '90s, and Dax, Terry Farrell's a very beautiful woman, and they don't want to put more makeup on her than necessary. That's why the trills were redesigned in the first place, from the big ridges that we had seen them have
Yeah.
in the Next Generation to the spots down the side. I think that was that's probably why they did it. They're like, we don't want to cover up all that beautiful
Yeah.
with makeup. So
Right. Yeah. Well, speaking of
unfortunate, but yeah.
speaking of beautiful female co-star, Kira is still pregnant in this episode. I was surprised by that. I know it is supposed to be shortly after the last
Hmm.
episode, but it seems like, I mean, Dax and Cisco had been off the station for some amount of time, so I was surprised she was still pregnant.
Well, they kind
Um,
of made it seem like they've been off the station for a couple of weeks, so like maybe 2 to 3 weeks.
Right. But considering that shooting from the last season to this season, I would imagine had some sort of time gap in there. I'm just wondering if Nana Visitor was still pregnant in real life. I imagine she was still pregnant in real life, so the character
Yeah,
was still pregnant in the show. I was just surprised by the way they were describing it in the last couple episodes when they were like, "Oh, Bajorans give birth to their babies faster than humans do." So I would have thought that like she was gonna give birth to the baby a little more quickly, but she doesn't. However,
so
it does lead to some great comedic
yes.
scenes in this episode. We could go
We're
ahead.
going to get to that right away, but I just want to say really quick, it's entirely possible that they did not have very much downtime in between the fourth and the fifth season.
I wouldn't be
Again,
surprised if that turned out to be true.
yeah,
Yeah,
back then, again, the '90s, they were famous for like cranking through stuff. So it was just like, as soon as some things were finished, they might have had like 2 weeks off, and then they were right back
right,
at it. That's entirely possible. Also,
right,
she does say in the episode where they finally, where she's pregnant, where they make her pregnant, that the gestational period for Bajorans is 5 months to the
right,
human 9 months.
right.
So, and of course, the baby had already been developed a little bit in Keiko as well. So there's going to be
Yes,
some fudging with time, I'm sure,
right.
on how they're going to get this to work. But yes, she is very pregnant. And as you said, it does lead to some great dialogue between two great characters, Gul Dukat and, of course, Dr. Bashir.
And we got to start with Gold
Of
Dukat because
course
this
we
is the
do. It's the
first
first
scene.
one. Yes.
Oh, it's so hilarious. Does what does he say? Is
He
the minister
says,
should be pleased with, or
yes,
does
he,
he
he,
realize?
he says, "You lured me here using my daughter under false pretenses. I show up to have Captain Cisco run this fool errand, and you're pregnant. I hope
Yeah,
First Minister Sakar realizes what a lucky man he is."
that's right. He looks her up and down because he's a
Mm,
creep when he does it.
because
Yep.
he wants her. It's been established.
Yes.
He has a fixation
Yes.
with Kira that
At this
does
point,
that
there's
is
no
creepy.
doubt
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And she's like, "Shakar's not the father." He's like, "Oh, who is?" Chief O'Brien.
O'Brien.
And the look of just absolute shock. If he wasn't already gray, I'd say the color drained from his face. Uh, just the look
and
of
she
shock, and she's just
and
eating
she
it up.
gives no
None, and they
explanation
get on the
at
turbo
all.
lift and go, and she's just eating it up. You see her just grinning while he's still just jaw floor, totally, absolutely. So
Yeah.
great scene. I mean, we can talk about the weird creep factor or whatever of Gul Dukat, but Mark Alimo, the guy who plays Gul Dukat, does a great
Yeah.
job. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. I just want to also point out about Gul Dukat in the scene when we see him walking, we see the infamous uh, Cardassian neck ridges. Um,
Uh-huh.
found out this weekend that that was done entirely because of Marco Lima. When they first introduced the Cardassians way back when, the original design didn't have all that. They had the facial part, but this was supposed to be just kind of a mottled gray, and then there was going to be nothing. But apparently, the makeup costuming designer noticed that Mark has an extraordinarily long neck. And so he
Hmm.
decided he wanted to highlight that. And that's where those were born for Cardassian. So you can thank him for all
Yeah.
the extra makeup and prosthesis that the actors had to sit through because his neck was so long.
And I'm glad they do it because it definitely makes the Cardassians stand
Yeah,
out. I mean,
it adds a lot.
you can ask facial ridges and nose things and eyes and ears and blah 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 blah. Everyone can have something special, but the ridges on the necks and the shoulders takes it to the next level.
Hmm.
So I'm glad that his physiology gave the character and the race more to work with. That's actually pretty cool.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, and then the other scene is it's just to give us a scene of Kira and Bashir. And my understanding is the two of them in real life by this time are actually
They
married.
are married. Yes, they are
And that's
married,
actually
and
their
that is their
kid,
kid that she is pregnant with. Yes.
right? And so it's funny to see them talking together because they seem to have some chemistry
Uh-huh.
in this
It was
episode.
a
All of a
great
sudden,
it was a great scene where she's like, and don't forget, this is your fault. And he's like,
yes,
what?
yeah, yeah,
And
and it's like,
their
yeah, in
little
real life,
back
it
and
is his
forth.
fault.
Yeah, it was like, yeah,
Yeah,
you did this to me. It's like, ah, wink and nod. I see. You did this to
yeah.
her. You
But
did.
I like that scene. I like that scene too because it reminds people who probably hadn't seen the show in a couple months, like how it was that she's pregnant. Oh, it's Keiko's baby. It was Keiko who was with them on the shuttle when something happened and they had to do the thing where she got the transferred baby. So it reminds us of the plot that revealed her pregnancy um, in a way that was also some good banter back and forth. It was funny for what it was worth. And yeah, again, it the chemistry there in that scene was like, wait a minute,
Yeah, they were
Shakar.
right. They were, they were just yucking it up, and Bashir is just all smiles. He's just grinning and just
Oh,
really,
he gets up
yeah,
close.
really
I was like,
enjoying all of it. I mean, it was just, yeah, the chemistry between the two of them in that scene, absolutely undeniable. And it's one of those, especially considering when we think about how they started in the first season, they were quite antagonistic with each other. He was this very fresh faced, boyish doctor who thought of her home as the wilderness, and she called him out on it.
right.
So she never really seemed to suffer him much. And now you wouldn't be able to tell it between the two of them. They look quite friendly, quite friendly. It was an enjoyable scene to watch. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but it's like, yeah, I think y'all filmed that more for their benefit than ours,
Well,
because
it also was. It's a nod toward the fact that yeah, actually,
they're
what's
together. They're a couple.
what's the actor's name?
Nana
Siddiq.
Visitor and
No, no,
Alexander Siddig.
that's Siddiq. I was gonna say that yes, he is the one responsible for that situation. Wink,
Mhm.
wink, nod, nod. Behind the scenes, blah blah blah. But yeah, those are funny. And then finally, Quark is the one that tells Cisco where to find Odo at the beginning. He's the one thing he hasn't been able to ever fix. Odo's upstairs moping, but he's not actually upstairs moping. He's enjoying the bubbles.
Oh
Bubbles.
no, he's definitely quite morose in this episode. He's questioning himself. He's questioning what he's going to do next. If he
That's
can even still
true.
do his job.
That's right.
He even
Yeah, you're
tells
right.
Cisco, he's like, "You need somebody who can turn into Gowron's pet Targ. I can't do that for you anymore." He is
Right.
definitely mourning the loss of who he was
Right.
and what he was, and what he could
Right.
do, and
Right.
he hasn't figured out yet that. He still has something to contribute, which is what we kind of get with him at the end of this episode. He's realizing that his mind, his critical thinking skills and ability has not been diminished at all.
Right.
He still is able to put this together. He's the one who figures out that Martok is the changeling,
Right.
not Gowron. So yeah,
Yes.
he it's through that, and as we see towards the end of the episode, he's a little bit more comfortable with himself. So
Right.
as much as this is a plot, we're jumping deeper and deeper into the plot here, Deep Space Nine. We're still seeing these character developing moments and seeing things shift and change for a lot of our main characters here.
Right.
Now, hopefully, as we move through, we can get some other characters to get some development. We gotta see some more of Dax, obviously. Um, Bashir's got to get something else. Worf has to get something else. I mean, we did a lot with him in season 4, but yeah, we're gonna have to come back, touch on
Yeah.
that some more.
Yeah.
So lots to uncover here.
Mhm.
Um, but as we're wrapping up, as it is clearly getting to the end of our time, any final thoughts on Apocalypse Rising?
I think the name is terrible. I'll say that. The name of the episode, that's dumb.
You know, I never really thought about it. I never really thought about what it meant.
Yeah. I just as I was, introducing the episode tonight, I was thinking about it, I was like, I mean, whatever. I mean, who cares? It's just the name of an episode, but it doesn't seem well titled. But
Well,
okay.
normally, I've never really thought about it. I'm just like, oh, great, Star Trek's on, and just kind of gloss
Yeah.
over the rest. But you're right. Like the episode, they don't make any references that would really explain the title.
Right.
And normally, something about the episode would explain it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll have
References.
to go back and like review like why they came with this title and what that was because I certainly don't know why they chose that.
Yeah, like
But
infiltration would have been an better name. That'd been a
right,
great name. But who cares? I'm just nitpicking at this point.
no,
Literally,
I
it's a
mean
great episode.
it's a yeah.
Probably one of the best ones actually in the entire show. Not that if I'm gonna rank it, and just put it up there. But yeah, great episode, great stuff. Yeah,
Yeah, I'll agree. I'm definitely going to agree. I love the action-packed nature of it. I love that we're just jumping right in. We're getting right back into the storyline, and as I said before, as pivotal as season 4 was, because it literally is a pivot in the direction of the show. Now, we're following through on that direction. Everything else that we're going to see from here on out is going to be building from these moments. All of these things are going to be important. The fact that they have reached a tentative peace agreement with at least a ceasefire anyway, with the Klingons is important for things that come next in this story.
mm,
So
right,
yeah, we're
good,
getting
good
those
stuff.
building blocks, we're getting those pieces, putting it together for what's going to be the ultimate climactic finish in season 7. So we're working on it. We're
Oh
getting there.
boy.
Um,
Okay.
Now, to turn our attention really quick to all things Trek, as I've said before, um, there's no new Trek. Everything is on hold until the SAG strike ends. Now we did get a little bit of an update on that. Apparently they had a tentative agreement, and I had spoken on that. I guess a couple episodes ago, 2 or 3 episodes ago. But as of the last update that I had received on this, which as of the airing of this episode would also be 2 weeks ago. Um, that is now done. That deal is dead. Apparently, the CEOs, Hollywood bigwigs, whomever they were, walked away from the deal in the 11th hour. So it looks like they're all kind of back to the drawing board, and we're looking at even more delays on any projects. Star Trek Discovery had already been pushed into middle of 2024 was the projected release of the final season. It looks like
Right.
that's going to be pushed even more because the whole reason it hadn't been released in the first place was there were some final scenes that needed to be shot, some touch-ups, some things like that that they can't do as long as the strike is in place. So just be prepared for that to take even longer for it to come out.
I haven't heard anything else about this since you texted me about it. I was trying to. I mean, I don't look out for news about this stuff all that much otherwise, but I haven't like no one else has. I haven't had anyone else come into
Yeah.
my orbit say, "Oh yeah, it's not working out." Like,
So I've been trying to keep up with it, but beyond that last update, and I got that update from because I follow a lot of Star Trek actors, of course, and Jonathan Frakes is the one who posted that this had happened. But I haven't seen anything else. So as far as I know, there has not been a change. No one is back to the negotiating table. So again, as of the dropping of this episode, it will be at least 2 weeks before with no change.
right,
So hopefully there will be one soon. Don't know, we'll see.
right,
There is some hope, though, in the form of Star Trek Prodigy, which was on the chop block for some inexplicable reason, has been saved by Netflix, of all places. So they're going to be airing new episodes of Star Trek Prodigy on Netflix. No idea when that's going to start. I think the SAG strike has something to do with that, too, because obviously we have voice actors who are a part of this. So, but they have bought the rights, and there has been an agreement made to continue the show. So I don't know when it's going to be done, but that is out there.
that's funny. I'm surprised Paramount would give it up to Netflix of all places, but
It's
okay.
yeah, it's weird that they would give it up to Netflix. It's just also weird they took it off the platform entirely. Like, there hasn't really been any explanation as to why they did that. It was
Right.
quite a popular show, from what I understand, but who knows? Also, Alex Kurtzman apparently is in talks to do another Star Trek movie. This one to be focused on Starfleet Academy and a group of cadets moving through Starfleet Academy and training. It's supposed to be a movie that's all about what it's like to be a cadet, classes that they take, how you move from cadet to ensign status, graduation, so forth and so on. So, kind of giving us the prequel to our officers that we love so much without having to be a prequel to our officers. So I appreciate that a little bit. I don't want to see a new movie with like young nervous Jean-Luc Picard at the Academy. I don't care. I don't want to watch it. I don't need it. Don't make it. All right. I'm just gonna
Picard's
put that out
story is
there.
ended. Yeah.
Picard's
So
story has been done to death. All right. Like I love that character. Love Patrick Stewart. Leave it alone. We don't
right.
need to see young, head full of hair, Jean-Luc running around campus being a cat or whatever. I don't want it. Don't do it.
Right.
We've already got various iterations of Spock, young, old, super young, like, all over the place. No more Spock. All right. Love the character too, but it's time to let some of these legendary characters go and
Right.
establish
Some
new
new ones.
ones.
Yeah.
So please don't
Bring back
touch any of
Cisco.
those. Hey, yeah, okay, that's one. I'll let you do that. Bring back Cisco. You can have that one. All right.
Oh, speaking of Cisco, we didn't mention Jake Cisco. He briefly was in this as well.
Yes, we have a brief
Um,
cameo of Jake Cisco.
I did still feel sorry for Jake. I feel like he's like Wesley Crusher by this point in the season of TNG had left the show. He was in the academy. He had his
Hmm.
own life. He was dealing with, and I feel like poor Jake. We need to do the same thing with him. We need him to grow and leave and live his own life. He's an adult now, and I think he's got a failure to launch. I'm like, oh no, but I'm sure we'll
Well,
find
he's
out more
not
about him.
he's not quite as old as Wesley was when Wesley finally left. He's getting close, but
Okay,
he's not quite there yet. And let's also not forget that he is, he's not necessarily following in his father's footsteps. He wants to
right.
be a writer. We know
Yes.
that. So maybe
Yes.
he's
True.
a
True.
little bit more attached to the civilian side of things. So maybe
Right.
things are going to turn differently for him, and maybe we'll get to see the civilian side of Federation life. I think that would be very interesting.
Right.
So we'll get there. But yeah, that's gonna be it. Anything else that you want to contribute before
The
we
eclipse today
sign off?
was pretty cool, man.
Yes, we had the eclipse today. Unfortunately, I thought it was a different day, so I didn't get the glasses and whatever. But we were still outside for it, and had some very interesting commentary from a precocious 8-year-old. So
Did y'all
yeah,
notice any shade? Like if you looked at like where like leaves on the ground, like shade from the leaves that has a crescent shape to it.
yeah, she
Yeah.
was talking about it. That's what she kept noticing over and over again. She's like, the leaves on the ground look like peacock feathers. That's what she said. And I just was like staring. I was like, you know what? I mean, she's right, and I just didn't make the connection,
Ah,
but she did,
yeah.
And we were talking about how it's oddly dim but
Yes.
light at the same time, and
It was crazy because I mean I'm looking up at this thing and like 90, 95, more like 90%, somewhere between 90 and 95% of the sun was blocked, but it didn't feel like the light had turned down by that much. It was still a
no,
bright day.
it
It
was
was a
still a very bright, very clear, very pleasant day.
oh, it was
There was a
amazing.
nice breeze. It wasn't overly hot, which we're here in Texas, so any day where it's not
Well,
above 80
my
is
dad pointed
amazing.
out that it actually felt maybe a little bit cooler than normal, in part because the sun was blocked during the midday. For everyone who's listening here in Austin, we got to see the eclipse that happened today, and it covered. I mean, around noon is when it was most covered. Um, so it was like for a whole hour beforehand, a whole hour afterward, it was going. The moon was crossing the sun. But yeah, during the midpoint of the day, it did feel it was glorious outside.
It
It was
was it
great.
was so nice. It was probably one of the nicest days where I've been outside anyway
Yeah,
in quite a while. So I
yeah,
really enjoyed that. But yeah, so then the next time that the eclipse comes around is in April, right?
yeah. There's gonna be so this one was not a full blocking of the sun, but apparently the one in April will be in a position to actually fully block the sun this time. And unfortunately for us here in Austin in Texas, we got the one today coming from the north west, it came southeast, but the next one's starting in the south, like in Texas, and heading up to the northeast. So
Okay.
for whatever reason, the central Austin area is going to be the crossing point for both of those eclipses. Don't know why or how it happened that way, but apparently it's going to be another
Science,
40.
man.
Apparently, it's gonna be another 45 years before the eclipse we saw today happens again. I heard someone say that.
Oh,
I don't know how accurate that is. Apparently, a lot of eclipses do happen, but it happens in the middle of the ocean. No one's in the Pacific Ocean or the Atlantic. No one cares. It's only when it's over land, and right now, the entire thing happens over land. So
oh,
yeah, it's
okay.
pretty cool to see. I got to give
Oh,
out
four.
some glasses to people because work we had been giving them out as a part of a promotional event. So I gave out 10 people some glasses to watch it. So it's pretty nice to help people out and get a chance to view it. So
Well, we were just out walking around. I've been very aware of the fact that we've been kind of cooped up a bit, and
Mhm.
so I'm just wanting us to get out more. Last weekend we took a little trip down to Fredericksburg with the family, and then just
Nice.
kind of keeping things going in that vein of just kind of being out and so forth. And so today we just went to the park that's not too far from here, did some of the trails that were out there. But yeah, it was like just weird to be walking around and the again dark but not. And
Yeah.
the number of people that were out also like surprised me, which I don't know. Um,
Beautiful
just
day. Beautiful day to
yeah,
be out. Yeah.
they're just everywhere, and I'm
Yeah.
I'm so used to when we go to that park. Typically, there's just not that many people,
Hmm.
but today there were a lot. I mean, there were so many people. It was difficult finding parking. Like
Wow.
normally that like never happens. Normally you just drive up and it's just a massive empty lot out there. But even like the places where I guess you would consider overflow parking were full. So we had a ways to go before we could get back to where the trails began.
Wow. Right.
So, but hey, I don't mind it if people are out, enjoying nature like I'm trying to enjoy it rather than causing a problem somewhere. I'm all for it. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I did want to quickly mention I started the Silo book. I mentioned the show Silo on Apple TV last couple months ago.
Hmm.
Great show. The book is good, but just like other things I've seen recently, I actually like the show better than the book. The book is actually interesting. Just minor spoiler is that the halfway point of the book is actually where the first season of the show ends, or at the very least, that seems to be the case. Um, there's a lot more content that the show chose to do with, like, the book is like 200 and some pages by the halfway point, and the half of that half, there's that quarter of the book they made into 7 episodes. Whereas the first 3 episodes are like the first quarter of the book, and the second quarter is they like expanded and add a lot more content for the show. I
Mm.
like that. The show I thought was definitely better for the changes they made. uh, the book is okay, it's not bad, but the show definitely was they made a lot of smart changes to make it a larger story. Like in the book, continue to read that. I'll tell you guys how it is. So
Well, I have one started the fifth book in the Expanse series finally, and I mean it's a very easy, brief start. I think I've read like the first 10 pages, so at least I've started it. So don't like be like, oh great, we're gonna whatever. Give me some time, all right. But also another thing that I've started is the show Moonlighting, which is on Hulu right now. It's an old '80s show. It ran from '85 to '89, I believe, if I remember that correctly from the little workup. This is this is the story of a very young Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd when they were starring on this show as a private investigative team.
right, I've heard about
It's
that show.
yeah, it's probably one of the most popular shows that came out of that era, that late '80s, early '90s era. Which it's funny how it gets lopped into early '90s TV, even though it was solidly filmed in the latter half of the '80s. Again, it was from '85 to '89. It did not spill over, but this is one of the shows that's always given as like a prime example of what jumping the shark means, because there was a big will they won't they between the two of them, and
Right,
then when it finally happens it's considered the why the show died.
right,
Like once it happened, no one tuned in, no one watched anymore, and that's
right,
what kind of killed the show.
right.
Apparently Sybil and Bruce Willis had such fantastic chemistry that didn't matter what the show was about. That's why everybody was tuning in every week. So
Right.
I'm looking forward to like kind of looking at the show, and because I have this, obviously I have a fascination with like early 90s ish stuff. So I've been watching it. I just started the pilot and I was already like, oh, this is fantastic. They've got everything. They've got people in overly done up suits. They have women with big hair. There's not cell phones. There's payphones everywhere, and not just
Right.
payphones, rotary payphones. Watching her having the dial and the giant cord and stuff, it's been
Oh man.
fantastic, fantastic.
Kids these
I'm
days aren't
loving
gonna
it.
know what
Not
they
at
got any of
all.
that. No.
Not at all. And I'm just loving every bit of the nostalgia that's coming out
Yeah.
of this. So yeah, if you're interested at all, go check it out. It's on Hulu. Go watch it. It's interesting. I was looking at the first season, only has 6 episodes in the first season. The next season has 18.
Right.
But yeah, go watch it. And we can talk about that on some of the other After Darks that we do, in addition to everything else. And if you're interested at all, tell you how that's going.
Right.
But I think that is going to do it for us. We have run over our time by about 20 or so minutes, but that's okay. You love us, right? That's
Yeah.
why you're here. You like hearing everything that we talk about. If you are, again, interested in doing the official Star Trek cookbook blood wine tasting, go ahead and pick that up and give that a shot. Let us know what you think of that. Otherwise, you can listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify, and find us across all the various social medias. So until next week, guys, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.